Hey everybody, this is episode 3 of how I woke up / how I got out at this point. And this is no easy task when you're a Jehovah's Witness or belong to any high control group, because I think this is the part where you truly realize that this is a cult, is when you try to leave. Because suddenly everybody seems to start really caring for you. I mean, caring for you like they've never cared for you before. And this is a phenomenon called lovebombing. Lovebombing is real. I've seen it in action. And when you're at the point where you recognize what it is and you need to come out, it's not really helpful, or you do not think it's great. It's pretty horrible, actually. So I was at the point where I had gone to my last meeting. I knew I could not go back to that place anymore. I had so much anxiety whenever I would step a foot into the Kingdom Hall or even the parking lot. A lot of times I would start crying when I would drive to the meeting. I felt little love. I felt that there was little help for what I was going through, or that anybody really cared. I felt like people wanted me to put on a happy face when I was not happy, when I was truly at my lowest point, and sometimes even felt like I was kicked when I was down. And suddenly I'm getting bombarded by everybody. And I lived, like I said in the previous episode, we had moved to a little cute house. It was a house that was flipped, so it was an older structure. It had a carport. This is important to the story, and no garage. And I lived surrounded by witnesses. The one sister who truly proved to be Christian and really was there for me, I talk about it in the whole story with Troy. We call her Jeannie. She was really helpful and wonderful. And her and I were now semi-neighbors. She lived in the neighborhood, and we would walk every day and we would talk. And I would tell her what I was going through, and it would make her really angry. She was very upset by all this, and she felt it too, because she was definitely not one of the elite either, and she would see it. At the same time, I also, because when you walk, you have long conversations, I would tell her that, like, my dad was sending me stuff, and I'm like, oh, he said this and this, because my dad had already woken up years prior, and I never saw him as this bad, evil apostate. I just figured he is my father, and the Bible says honor your father and your mother, and so I did. And my friend Jeannie said, your dad's an apostate and you better be careful. And I thought, well, he's just kind of like a critical thinker person. I just didn't view him as an apostate, even though he was emailing me stuff over a 10-year span. And now that I was in the process of waking up, I actually went back into my email and looked at all the emails that he had sent me. And I'm like, wow, most of these emails didn't even reach my mind. I don't know if they contributed somewhere deep down inside, but I was not really even aware. I blocked them off. I'm like, this is all like not true. This is from Satan, whatever. But I didn't shun him, and I didn't tell on him. He was just my dad. I still, would talk to him like a regular person. And at the same time, my mom had a childhood friend. In a previous episode, I talked about this brother. He was baptized at a convention where my mom said, oh, there's a child being baptized. And she was really upset about a kid being baptized, because that felt really wrong, because he wasn't an adult. But this gentleman had woken up, and he kind of did the cold shower method, where he put everything in one email, everything in his waking up process. He just wrote everything in there, everything that upset him about the organization. And he didn't have my mom's email, so he emailed it to me to give to her. And so we kind of like read the email together. This is like a couple years prior to all of this happening. And we really thought it was all not true. And like, what is happening? Oh my gosh, like, this is so weird. And we're sitting there like a little bit baffled, but totally rejected it. But at the end of the day, it's still in there somewhere. It's in there. Maybe it's steering you. It's definitely in there. Like, you can't unsee it. So it's all these little drops in the bucket that contributed to it. So now here I am. And before I woke up, or like shortly before, we had a major flood at the house. My kiddo had a talk that night. And the flood was so bad that I was running around with my small child trying to fix the situation, trying to do something about this water. And there's meeting, and I can't even believe you're concerned about this meeting and the kids talk, but there's no way I can go because I'm dealing with like a flooding. And I text the elder and I'm like, look, we're not going to be able to be at the meeting because I have like an emergency. And he wrote me back, I can pick your kid up. And I'm like, no, I'm not getting him ready. I am not sending him with other people. And like, that's what you're worried about, is that he's going to make it to the meeting, that he's going to be there and give his talk. You're not concerned about like, look at what's happening in my house. I'm a single mom. Are you for real? I sent him pictures and it was pretty bad. And he wrote, I'm sorry that's happening to you. And that was it. That was it. And so I ask you, where is the love? Where is the love when all we hear about is that it's an identifying mark of true Christians is the love? And I saw it from individuals, but it was rare. It was rare, and especially when you are not part of the elite, when you're a lowly person, so to speak. And so now I recognize I can't go back to the meeting. I'm done. I'm like finding out the truth about the truth, and I cannot go back. And so now I have to kind of figure out so many things because it's impossible to stop going. You can't just stop going and then live in the middle of Jehovah's Witnesses. So the first meeting that we miss is just a bunch of text messages, and they're pretty much all the same. We miss seeing you. We miss seeing you. You're such a faithful sister. We miss seeing you. And then I miss the next meeting and more text messages come in. I now miss another meeting and people start showing up at the house. And this was really like an anxiety inducing because I didn't know who I was going to run into and what to say because you can't tell them the truth. And I was just really like, oh my gosh, who's going to be at the house? So the elder started coming and leaving notes. And it was the one elder who I really did like, and he was super sweet. And he was the only elder I would actually talk to. And I'll actually post like my message to him. And one of the key points that I wrote in my long letter to him, where I kind of poured my heart out, and I was very careful not to sound apostate, but like air what was wrong with the lack of love that I was seeing. And one of the things is we had now been in this congregation for years, and people did not know my kids' names. How is that even possible? Like the elder body, when you're there for years, doesn't know your kids' names? I mean, it makes you really feel like, how can they possibly care about you and claim that they care about you when they don't even know your kids' names, when you've been there for years at every meeting in service? I mean, that's really, really hurtful. And this is like your small, teeny, tiny community that you spend every hour with, that you do all these little parties with and get-togethers, and they still don't know your name. And then they stop calling on the kids, and just the constant criticism. And I said to him, I'm like, when people don't know your kids' names, especially after you're going through a divorce, and we would need so much love, like my kids need love for all the stuff that they've been through, then you don't matter in the congregation, was one of the things I said to him. And he really just tried to kind of get a hold of me. And I said, look, I'm worn out. I am at my end. The kids and I are stressed out, and we're taking a break. We're taking a break. That was my stance. So they show up. our living room door, because this was a really small house, so like the door to outside was like right in the living room. So if people would knock, they're like right there and we're all being quiet. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is crazy how many people are showing up. And you knew, like, especially around service time, around meeting time, you knew people would start showing up. Plus, I'm living in an area where there's all these witnesses living anyway. So they would drop by and we wouldn't open the door. We're huddling up inside. And at this point, the kids really haven't really said much yet. They are, just thinking, oh, okay, because sometimes, you don't want to open the door to people. So that's what they thought at first. And I will do a next episode on like leaving with kids, because that's an entire own tragedy and thing. It's a terrible thing, but I will keep that for the next episode. This is just like trying to weasel ourselves out, like kind of trying to fade, but it's hard to fade when you were part of all of this. I had friends, people knew us, and especially the sister who I walked with every day, we were really close. It broke my heart. And she walked over one day and she came inside and we were close, and I started telling her about the child abuse. And you can't even make this stuff up, but she herself was abused. She was abused by an elder at a sleepover. So she knew all of this. The only lucky thing for her was that her dad wasn't a witness. So he called the cops and this elder was arrested. This whole story wreaked havoc on this elder's family, who were all Jehovah's Witness. One kid committed suicide. It come out that he had abused like his own kids, and it was just horrible. And years later, she even told me that he was released from prison after a long time, came back, and I think he had like a restraining order or something. He wasn't allowed near her, but he came to the meeting and now was married to a witness woman who had no idea of his past. Can you believe it? The same story again. And my friend was furious. She was furious. And there was like all the restrictions were lifted off him because he'd like done his time. And he was just a part of a congregation. And she talked to the elders and it was a mess. So she knew this was true. How many of these stories are among Jehovah's Witnesses? It is frightening how many stories there are. So she knew, and I told her about all the child abuse stuff. She knew my story, which is so similar to her story, which is basically always coming down to the brothers really aren't doing what they're supposed to do to protect children. End of story. They're not. And they're not instructed to. They're not protecting kids. And to me, it was like the weakest member, the member that needs the most help in the congregation is a child, because a child needs us. And Jesus loved the children. And here we're not helping children. Honestly, we're helping pedophiles. We're covering up for them. We're forgiving them. We don't care about kids as a religion. We are not helping kids. And that was horrible to me, especially as a mom. Like, I'm a mama bear now. I have to protect my kids. And my friend was crying. She, on one hand, she knew, she's seen it, she's experienced it. But on the other hand, she still thinks it's the truth. She thinks you're leaving Jehovah. And she says to me, you're choosing death for your children. And I'm like, no, I'm choosing safety. And she cried. And it was heartbreaking. And so she gave me like peace, though. She left us alone. She wasn't harassing me. She would just send me like very nice, loving text messages. And I really do miss her. She was really good to us, and I hope I was good to her too. I appreciate her heart. I do. She went through a lot. So then another time after the meeting, a sister had come by, and boy, everybody has a story. Her and her husband, she was really nice. They were long-time Bethelites, and they were kicked out of Bethel. Can you believe it? They were actually kicked out of Bethel because Bethel retired them. Bethel, who had told people, come work from Jehovah. Jehovah will not fire you. Have a career at Bethel. These two had been at Bethel for over 25 years. And suddenly, when the cuts were made, they were sent away out in the field. And it was heartbreaking for them. They would sit at the meeting and cry. She would cry. And she moved in with her husband, with her mom's house. And I thought, well, at least they have their mom. And I thought like her mom owned the house. And later I found out they rented the house. So you didn't pay into Social Security. Bethel just retired you. And now you're elderly and you get to live with your mom in a house that's not even her own, because Jehovah's Witnesses are just not high earners. And then you get to try to work in this, in the world after you've been at Bethel for so long. And she just would sit at meeting and cry because she couldn't believe this was happening to her, because they don't care about people. They just basically fired them out of Bethel. Like, here you are on your own. It was just insane. It was insane. And so they showed up at my house, and I'm not at the meeting. I'm huddled up inside again. And she keeps calling me. And she sees my car. It's a carport. She sees my car. And she says, I know you're inside. Open the door. That's the voice message she left me. I know you're inside. Open the door. And I'm not opening the door, Another sister came by and she left presents for me and the kids at the door. And I'm thinking, where were all of you? Like, we've gone through like a flood, a divorce. My kids, they needed all this while we're in. Now that we're leaving, now we're getting gifts at the door. And the kicker was, one day the elders came by. I didn't realize they were there. And my kiddo opens the door to the carport, and they're at the door to the carport. They saw our car was home. There they are. I'm not asking them in. I tell them, I really didn't want to see him, but now my kiddo had opened the door, we didn't know they were out there. And I said, look, you were trying to get people to come to the meetings by preaching to them. And then when we're at the meeting, we don't care for them and they leave out the back door in droves. And that breaks my heart. And the elders were like, I know, but it's still the truth. It's the truth. And it doesn't matter what people do. He's like, I've known of sisters who got into fist fights at the Kingdom Hall. And I don't really know why he told me that. And I said, boy, that's pretty sad, I mean, really, that's really sad. And they were trying to talk to me. And I'm not a confrontational person. And this was not easy for me, and it also was hard for me to leave them standing at the door because I didn't want to be cruel, but I can't ask them in. I'm trying to fade, but in the end, they were there for a very long time. I mean, a very incredibly long time, and told me all this stuff to get me back. And I'm just so stressed out. And I'm like, no, I'm not coming back. No. And so I closed the door, and all this bombarding is so awful. It's awful. This love bombing is awful. When you have made your decision, I'm not coming back. And so I sat down with my mom and I said, look, we have to sell this house. I know we just moved. I know we just bought this house. But we have to sell this house because we can't live here anymore. This is not going to stop. Everyone knows where we live. At the least, they're going to try to get the kids to go to the meeting. And we can't have that happen either. Like, we've got to move. And we're like, I don't really know where we're going to move to and how can we do this move? Because now we're all alone. Like, now we're on our own. Like, no more congregation, because when I went through the divorce, I thought, it's okay. I have my faith. I have my congregation, which I had like one sister, really, because the congregation, I didn't really have them. But you think that you do. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I am on my own. It's really just me. It's my mom, me, and kids. How are we going to do this? But first step, like, we got to get out of here. We've got to get out of here. And that was the first step when we decided we're going to sell the house. And I don't know what we're going to do, but this needs to happen. And then the next step is, how are we going to talk to the kids about all of this? Because, hi, like, I'm your mom and I have taught you this your whole life. And now, we're not going to go anymore, even though I taught you never to miss a meeting. Wow, not easy, but you know what? At the end of the day, it can be done, and it will be done because you can get through this. You're strong, and I will talk about that in the next episode.